Hey, Alex, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Devek, thanks so much for having me.
Let me ask you a set of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What are the three skills you think are essential for someone to be a good lobbyist?
Hmm. I don't know if it's so much a skill as a trait, but I think honesty is the first and foremost. It's in this job, you have your word and your reputation. Um, there's no bar to entry, there's no license. Anybody can come and do it as long as they can do it and have good relationships in the building. And there's no better way to torch those good relationships than by developing a reputation for being dishonest. So these policymakers expect us to be able to provide them with information, and they do, and they should expect us to be honest about that. Not only honest about what our client's position is, but the context around the bill, who's opposing it, what efforts have gone into it in other places. And I think if you can be honest and develop that reputation for trustworthiness, then you're going to be fine. So you asked for three. I would say the ability to take complex information and ideas and distill them down to a form that anybody can understand, and anybody who's also very busy. These folks are incredibly busy, especially during session. And if you have to, answer three follow-up questions to the issue that you're describing, you probably haven't done a good enough job at preparing to explain it. Um, and I think the third, again, I don't know if it's a skill so much as a personality trait, but I think it's important to enjoy people. This is a relationships business. And if you enjoy getting to know people, if you can enjoy spending time with people and engaging with people who you may not agree with on everything or many things, who may be very different from you in a lot of ways, then that's going to go a long way to not only making you successful, but allowing you to enjoy the work. Because, for those of us who do this for a living, we spend a lot of time together, and we spend a lot of time in the spaces where the policymakers are. I think we spend probably more time with each other and with these legislators than we do with our families. And so if you don't enjoy that, then it's probably going to make you an unhappy lobbyist. And I don't think unhappy lobbyists are meant to stay in the business for very long.
Well said. And if you had all the money in the world, what would you do with it?
I personally had all the money in the world, probably get into a lot of trouble. I think that I would um, put some things into place so that my family didn't have to worry about money, not only myself and my immediate family, but generations to follow. And then would use the balance to try to make opportunities available to folks who otherwise wouldn't have them. I've got a special place in my heart for obvious reasons for veterans. And there are a lot of charities and veterans organizations doing a lot of important work, but there's a tremendous amount that still needs to be done. So I think I would find some worthy causes supporting veterans and try to contribute to those.
Well, yeah, I did check your profile out and you were in the United States Army. So thank you so much for the service. Can you tell us a little bit about what really inspires and motivates you to be doing what you're doing?
I think the ability to make a difference and to be of service at a broader, larger scale. My background before I did this work, I was a direct practice social worker. So I was essentially trying to help people one at a time or one small group at a time. And I found the opportunity to make a difference that I feel is important and beneficial that affects a much larger group, really satisfying.
Can you tell us a little bit about if you had to educate the public
Mhm.
about the role of lobbying, how would you describe it in one sentence?
You know, I I've explained to my kids what I do. Some of them are still fairly young. And the way that I explain it to them is I try to help the people who make the rules make sure the rules are fair.
Mhm. Well said. With when you talk about rules, if you had to change one rule in the government process, what would you change?
Uh, I'm gonna accept the changes that I would make on behalf of my clients because I feel like that's unfair. So I would say that I would have the legislators and their staff paid a professional wage. The fact that, they say it's a part-time legislature, but it's really not. For a job that demands as much as it does, to pay 13,000 a year plus per diem, I think that's really unfortunate. I think there are a lot of folks who would be fantastic representatives of their districts, who feel called to serve, who just can't do it because they can't afford to do it. And so if the job paid what it should, I think we'd see candidates come forward that could really be good at the job, who otherwise just aren't able to do it. And I think the folks who serve the people in the way that they do and have such a tremendous impact on the lives of citizens of North Carolina deserve to be paid for it appropriately, and they're certainly not now.
That's very true. What is the one thing you would like to share with the listeners, which very few people know about you?
Hmm. Um, I don't know how many people know this. I grew up overseas. My middle school years were in Korea. My high school years were in Thailand. And so when I came back to the US, and this is a long time ago, this is before the internet, this is before cell phones. So we were pretty cut off from American culture. And when I got back to the States after so long, I did feel disconnected from the culture of that I walked into. And I came back and went immediately to the University of Florida, where most members of my family had gone, and walked into a situation where I looked like everybody else, but I certainly felt, I've described it as feeling like a foreign exchange student in a Floridian's body. And so I missed a lot while I was gone, and felt like quite a fish out of water. And that feeling and a sense of wanting to have a challenge and wanting to be of service in some way led me straight from the university campus to the recruiter's office. And after a year at UF, I joined the Army.
Nice. And what is the best advice you've ever received?
Hmm. I'll limit it to the best advice I've received about doing this work. I was very frustrated early in my career while I was still an intern, because I was having trouble moving forward a bill that had been assigned to me. And the person who I was working with at the time as a supervisor and a sort of a guide in this process sort of took me by the shoulders and said, it should be hard to change the law. And that really stuck with me, that there's a reason the process can be as slow and it's at times torturous as it is, but there is a reason it's set up the way it is, because these ideas should be vetted and they should be considered and they should be run through all the various stages of the process so that ultimately the result can be the best one for the state.
Before this conversation started, you had mentioned about you being a part of a television production. So the question I have for you is, do you have any crazy stories you want to share with the listeners?
Just that one, huh?
Yeah.
Well, what I was telling Deepak before we got started is we were talking about India, where Deepak's from, and I've spent some time in India, and I was recruited while I was there. I was in a cafe and I was approached and asked if I would be interested in coming and joining a movie production. So I had the opportunity to do that, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I had to leave the next day, so I wasn't able to continue. But there was certainly, I was told there was more work available if I wanted it. So who knows? Had I not had to get on a train the next day and head off to meet somebody, maybe I'd still be in Mumbai making movies. But
That's amazing. So you were an army general, right?
I was a Roman army general in the movie. I think I kept getting promoted. I started as a soldier, and then I kept getting promoted. They gave me different color plumage for my helmet. I think probably because I was tall.
That's amazing. With that, the last question I have for you is if you had the time capsule to go back in time to any era, which era would you pick?
That's a really great one. I think I would be really interested to be in some of the key locations at the formation of our country. To be just a fly on the wall during the Second Continental Congress, to be part of some of those battles, to be to be around some of those discussions and our founders doing the work they did to create our nation. I think that's probably where I would go.
Good answer. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood.
Okay.
You did say you grew up in Southeast Asia. Can you
Mhm.
tell us, how was those formative years? What did you learn from those experiences?
I I credit my parents' decision to move us overseas with a lot of what I know and what I've become. The experience of seeing more of the world than I had to that point. Until then, I had lived in the southeastern United States and in various towns, moving every year or two, but had a pretty limited experience and worldview. And having the opportunity to grow up in foreign countries and around people who were, in some ways like me, but with very different backgrounds, very different experiences and perspectives. I think that instilled an ability and an interest in spending time with all different kinds of people, recognizing that my perspective was not the only one or necessarily the best one, and appreciating all the many blessings that we enjoy and that I have enjoyed. I went from corporate housing in Thailand on an air-conditioned luxury bus to the gated private international school that we attended, and drove past some of the most abject poverty that you can imagine. And, you know, passing kids who are my age, who are in pretty desperate circumstances, and seeing that with my own eyes, not being able to look away really gave me an appreciation for how lucky I have been and continue to be. Um, and I think that helped instill a sense of wanting to be of service in some way.
And how old were you until you stayed in Asia?
So went when I was 12 and returned to the States. I graduated high school at 17 and came back.
So you were there for about 5 years,
Overall, about six. Yeah,
6 years. That's amazing. And what made you move back to the United States?
it's time to go to college.
And you picked I see that you picked Bachelor's of Arts in Social Work. Is that right?
So when I first started, so again, pretty much my entire family had gone to the University of Florida. There were buildings on campus named after members of my family. My parents met there. I was born on campus. Um, Aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. I mean, it was the place you go, and really, I didn't apply anywhere else. I didn't expect to go anywhere else or have any other idea in mind. So again, just did not find the reentry to the culture very easy. Didn't find the big school culture easy to navigate. I'd come from a relatively small private K through 12 school environment. And so when I joined the Army, I intended to serve in my active duty role for the prescribed number of years, which is 3 years. And I joined the National Guard when that initial term of service was over. But I had been injured during my time in active duty. And so I received a letter from the Veterans Administration telling me that I was being medically discharged from the National Guard, and that the GI Bill that I had earned through my active duty service was being converted to a VA scholarship. During the time that I was in, active duty, I got an associate's degree at the community college on base. And so when I left the Army, I was ready to start undergrad. I'd had a sense of what I wanted to do, again, to be of service in some way. Wasn't exactly sure what that was going to be. And the morning of the first day of classes for what would be my junior year, my first year back in sort of undergrad, um, since before the Army, just happened to be September 11, 2001. So I woke up, I was on the West Coast. I woke up to family on the East Coast calling, saying to turn on the TV. And this is, between the first and second planes hitting. And I knew when I saw that the active duty unit that I had served with, including the infantry squad that I had led and all the men that I had served with and trained, were going to be going overseas somewhere. And that the guard unit that I had been a part of for a short time was likely also going to be heading overseas. And both of those things did happen.
Oh,
And so I realized that it was some VA administrator that I never met who took a look at my file and decided that I was going to be discharged. And that was the reason that I was going to college instead of going overseas in harm's way. And
oh, I see.
so, not that I needed any more motivation to choose a path of service, but that certainly cemented it for me. So I picked social work as my major and finished my undergraduate degree and started in that profession, and did that until I came to this work.
And if you had to talk a little bit about what takeaway did you get from being at the army, and what is it that you learned which you probably have it instilled in yourself to this day? What would that be?
I mean, I think the standard answer would be discipline. I didn't particularly have or really need that much in my earlier life. I was, as I say, was fairly privileged in a lot of ways. I specifically chose the infantry when I joined the Army, but I asked the recruiter what was most difficult, and he suggested the infantry, which he was right. But I knew I was looking for a challenge, and I think the discipline that is instilled in all of us through the training has certainly been a benefit in my life since then. But more than that, when I say I had grown up in a diverse community, it was certainly diverse in that, a small minority of the people that I went to high school and middle school with were Americans. Most were from somewhere else. A big sort of melting pot of folks from different cultures. But we all did have in common that we were expatriate kids, children of business people whose companies generally were paying for us to go to this private international school. So the diversity that I found in the Army was less, national origin and even racial, but more background, economics, education. And so I went from one situation where I was a minority and into another, where I certainly was. My background was fairly unique in that setting as well, and learn to not only get along with and have respect for, but serve with and form, a cohesive unit with people who are on paper, very different. Some folks with very little education who came from backgrounds where they lived in one town their whole life, um, didn't have the same interests as me, didn't have the same accent as me. Um, maybe their politics were different, but the Army sort of finds a way to help you realize that you are not the most important person in this unit, and that for the unit to function and to function well, you have to find ways to work together, even with people who may seem very different than you, and to form not only a good working relationships, but bonds and brotherhood with people who probably otherwise I never would have come in contact with, was a great privilege. But I think it's also a a skill that carries forward into this work, because I do find myself spending time with folks who have very different backgrounds, very different stories, different perspectives, maybe different politics, even other lobbyists who have clients with different perspectives than my clients. But I think one thing that has been of great benefit to me is just that ability to work with all kinds of different people from any background, find something in common, work together or against folks, and still have that same level of mutual respect and the ability to, to disagree one day, agree the next, but see each other as people, and form those relationships. That's been important in the work and just in my life in general.
That's a very good insight. So after you graduated with a bachelor's, you
Mhm.
did work as a social worker, am I right? So can you tell us a little bit about, you worked there for about 3 years. Can you tell us a little bit about what did you learn from that?
I did have to take some time off so I could travel to India, because I knew that Bollywood was calling, at least for that one day. But yes, for the better part of those 3 years, I worked as a direct practice social worker with individuals, with small groups. I managed a group home, worked with teenagers in like a wilderness therapy setting. And I knew that to continue my career, I needed, or I should pursue graduate work and a graduate degree. So that's what brought me to North Carolina. I came because UNC has one of the best schools of social work in the country. My family's all in the Southeast, so I wanted to come home. I'd been away for a long time, and got to Chapel Hill in 2005 and started that work. And by the time I started my program, my intention was to be an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, direct mental health provider. That's what I had, started down that path and assumed that that's what I would do. But I found working within the system, this is a state and federally funded system, was incredibly frustrating. I felt called to do the work, and I felt like there was good work to be done, but there were a lot of barriers, systemic barriers to doing good work, and a lot of incentives that were sort of misaligned. There was a tremendous amount of money in the system. It just wasn't going to the right places, in my opinion. I found myself filling out reports and duplicate and pen, mailing them off to who knows where, never really to be, seen again. Didn't really seem to have any impact on what was actually happening on the ground level. So by the time I got to the School of Social Work, I was so disenchanted and frustrated by my experience that I was really looking at public policy and what public policy decisions had been made to create a system like that. And one of the many blessings and turning points in my life, um, a woman named Rebecca Brigham at the School of Social Work, who was in charge of placing us in internships, said, well, you should focus on public policy, and we have an internship for you. Public policy, I think, is the way to go. And I said, I don't really have an interest in going to Washington, D.C. And she explained, no, most public policy that has been affecting you is decided in Raleigh. I had no concept of this whatsoever. I got an internship with a small nonprofit, doesn't exist anymore, but a small nonprofit that did work on behalf of children's issues, and didn't own a suit, didn't know how to tie a tie, didn't know where Raleigh was really, and started my internship in the summer of 2006 with my one $50 suit from Marshall's, which I wore for the entire session. And by the end of the first day, I was hooked.
Nice. That's amazing. And you graduated, you finished your graduation with master's degree with the social work there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But you decided by then that you're going to be in government relations. Is that right?
Yes. So I, at that point, was an intern, and I was working on some issues and was making some progress, but my internship ended because I graduated, but the session wasn't over. So I was, some very nice folks put a little bit of money together to hire me to keep me on to finish working for the rest of that session. And the next couple of years, I continued to come back and work sort of one issue, one client at a time. My wife worked 2 jobs, all week and then all weekend and every holiday for several years. because what I was doing was not paying the bills. And slowly over time, did more work, was approached by more clients, and slowly built the firm um, to where we are now.
That's amazing. So you are talking about Alex Miller Government Affairs. So why did you decide that you weren't going to, go and work for directly with a law firm or an association? Why did you decide that you want to set up your own boutique shop?
I would love to tell you that it was a conscious decision. Um, Nobody tried to hire me back then, quite frankly.
Okay.
I also would take, self-imposed leaves of absence to go work on campaigns that I believed in.
Okay.
Um, but by the time the firm had gotten to the point where we had attracted interest of larger firms and started to get those offers, at that point I was used to working for myself, used to deciding who I was going to work with, what issues I was going to take on, and I didn't want to give that up.
Okay, makes sense. And can you tell us a little bit about the clients who you work with and what kind of policies are you interested in?
So we have a really great, diverse mix of clients, a lot in healthcare and energy. We represent a number of professional associations, everything from tow truck drivers and mortgage bankers to nurses and physical therapists. And so that's been really helpful in keeping the work interesting. I don't know that I would do as well working on a single issue for a single client day in, day out. I like the diversity of issues we get to work on. Every session it changes a little, but the core group of clients that have been with us from the beginning are still with us, and that's been great. And I've got another lobbyist in the firm who works with me, who has taken on some additional clients that have come to us, and so it's been an interesting model of growth that is working for us. That as we continue to grow her book of business and her capacity continues to grow, and so I think that's probably the model for the future, is continuing to grow in that way. And I don't know how big we'll get, but not so big that we can't continue to provide the same level of service, and not so big that we're in a place where we sort of have to take on work that we're not actually interested in or passionate about.
Can you talk us a little bit about your a typical day of your job?
Oh my,
And
there's no
what is the
such
best
thing.
part of sorry, what is it?
I said there's really no such thing as a typical day. It's so varied, and that's one thing I love about it. I'm sitting in my office in downtown Raleigh, particularly when session is in and active. We're rarely here because we're generally down at the legislative building. But we get to work with our clients both during the legislative session to pursue, their legislative agenda, but also when the session is not active, helping do work with political action committees and campaigns and things. So there's really not, one day is never the same as the other, which is one of the things that I love the most about the job. You never know what to expect. And as soon as you start to get comfortable, somebody will surprise you. So I think that's one of the things that we really enjoy is the work stays interesting. It's after almost 20 years, it hasn't gotten repetitive, and every day is different.
And does personal politics play a role in this job?
I think there are probably some things, a small number of issues that I wouldn't take on because of my personal belief on certain things. I've never really had an issue where somebody approached me and said, "We want you to work on something you're diametrically opposed to." I think maybe I don't hide how I feel about certain things well enough for that to happen. Um, but no, I mean, and I don't know if it's my personal politics have attracted certain clients or the work that I've done has informed my politics, but we generally, if there's a common theme, as diverse as the client list is and the work that we do is, if there's a common theme, it's that we represent folks who are looking to take what they know and they can do and put it to work without restriction. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. as I said, there's no barrier to entry for this work. There's no, if you had to be a lawyer to be a lobbyist, I wouldn't be a lobbyist. I wouldn't have this opportunity. There's no exam that you have to take. There's no supervision from some other profession. There's no state sanctioned monopoly that governs the work. And so for other kinds of professionals, people who have, done the work, gotten the degrees, taken the tests, gotten the licenses, or started the businesses, as we have, taken the risks, done everything that was asked of them, and then to have government or policies get in the way of their ability to do the thing that they are passionate about and that they're qualified to do, that really bothers me. And so we find ourselves doing a lot of work that centers around trying to remove those restrictions. And I really enjoy that.
That's a beautiful answer. Can you talk a little bit about your future? This last part segment is all yours, so you can talk
Okay.
anything about yourself. Where do you see yourself down the line? What would you like to promote about your organization? Or do you see yourself in the office, at the office as well? Are you running for office or anything like that?
Oh no, when in the office, I was about to say, I hope not too much sitting in the office. Definitely not running for office. I have the utmost respect and admiration for people who do run, to give of themselves. Having worked on campaigns as well, I think I've seen really up close and personal how much it takes for an entire family to run for office. We say like the entire family serves when you're talking about the military. And I think the entire family serves when it comes to this kind of public service as well. So I have absolutely nothing but respect for the folks who do it. And when we have the opportunity to help support folks that we believe in, we certainly want to do that as well. But it's not, I don't think it's in my future. I really enjoy this work. And I think the future for me is to continue to do it. And, I imagine that if I stop doing it well, or stop doing it the right way, which I don't intend to do, that, I'll, that somebody will let me know that. Right. And there's no guarantees that anybody's going to want to take us up on our offer of service, from any session to the next. And so I don't take anything for granted. My hope is that our clients and future clients will continue to give us the opportunity to do work for them, because we feel very grateful and honored to do it. And again, I think if I can, I had the opportunity to learn. I had the opportunity to fail and to do the job, what I can objectively look back on and say badly when I first started, because I had an internship that allowed me to sort of go through the paces of doing the work and learning as I was doing, with little risk to myself or our clients. And that was a tremendous opportunity. And I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't had that opportunity. So if there are ways that I can help make the opportunity available to others who are interested in it, I want to do that. I find myself with not quite enough time to do that as much as I would like to now, but I do see some more veteran lobbyists who have obviously decided to take some of their time and their wisdom and sort of impart that to the next generation. And so when I think about the future, I hope that I'll be able to do that as well.
Alex, I want to conclude this by saying that it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for your service. And I can definitely say for sure that with the integrity and the clear communication skills you have a very bright future. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Ebek. I really appreciate it.